All right, all right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of another. Oh man, I always do this. Another episode of Bible and Brekkie. Another morning with Bible and Brekkie, and here we are with Brian. Shout out to the rest of the crew.
Yeah. One of them is flying, dude, across
Almost
the
fine, yeah,
nation.
across the nation. So shout out to Steven and Gabe, wherever you at. Um, reach out to us, bro. We'd love to hear
And
from you.
and, and Joe.
Nah, we can't blame him. Joe's been he's in 3 hours earlier than us, so it's kind of early for him. 6 a.m., 7 a.m.
Amanecer con Cristo.
Es lo más importante. So there you are, Joe. But here we are. We've been going through Hosea, very from some deep conversations that we've had, some chapters that we've been covering. Great conversations. But before that, Brian, how you doing, man? Tomando
I'm
mate.
good, bro. Here drinking some mate,
Mm-hmm.
like always. Just enjoying the morning, man.
Yeah.
It's the first time in a while that I have any like appointments before Bible and Brekkie. So as you can see, I'm completely showered and brushed and
Dressed and everything.
dressed. Yeah, no baseball cap today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm good, man. I'm having a good morning.
It's
I'm
your
probably
perfect
gonna like shut down in a few hours, but
and just knock out. Yeah, take a nap. Man, I've the beauty of naps, man, during the day, right? Just
yeah,
being able to take a nap, a quick nap, power nap. I did that yesterday. I couldn't concentrate to think. I was really tired. I was like, I'm just gonna take a nap, and then it just refreshes you.
bro. I'm telling you, man. I wake up from a nap and it's kind of like that morning energy when you wake up in the
Hmm.
morning and you're like either drinking your coffee or in our
Right, right,
case a tea
right,
or whatever.
right.
Just like after you wake up from a nap, you're like, let me do that morning routine, and you do
Hmm.
it, and you're like, wow, I'm set to go.
Yeah, yeah,
It's really nice. It's really
yeah,
good.
yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Although sometimes it's kind of like your body wants some more, so it's like you're like,
Yeah,
uh,
that's when you set multiple alarms.
yeah, and then it's like you snooze all the 5 minute one, the 10 minute one, the 15 minute one.
You take off your Apple Watch and you
Hmm.
put your phone far away from you so
That's
that you
smart.
have to get up
You have to
to
get
go
up.
turn it
You
on.
have to get I love that. I love that. But yeah, so take some naps, guys. Get some rest. Very important. Very important. But today we're going into Hosea chapter 6. We've been going through the book of Hosea, and it's been, interesting, right? For lack of better words, right? Starting from the first 3 chapters of Hosea being called by God to go out and marry a prostitute, to
Yeah.
just model what it looks like to have that relationship between God and Israel. And then we get to kind of the heart of what God is wanting to tell Israel and his people and saying, hey, you're being unfaithful to me. And this is literally what it looks like, right? It's a very graphic illustration that Hosea has to live out. But
Right.
here we continue. We covered chapters 4 and 5 last week. So if you didn't check it out, check it out. And here we're going into chapter 6. Again, kind of God is making his case against his people and saying what's going on. And so we're just gonna start reading in chapter 6, verses just do 1 through 3 for the time being. And it reads like this: Come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn us to pieces, but he will heal us. He has injured, but he will bind up our wounds. After 2 days, he will revive us, and on the third day, he will restore us, that we may live in his presence. Let us acknowledge the Lord. Let us press on to acknowledge him. As surely as the sun rises, he will appear. He will come to us like the winter rains, like the spring rains that water the earth. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Come, let us. I think people have shared this and read this quite a bit. Come, let us return to the Lord. He's torn us to pieces, but he's going to heal us.
Hmm.
He has injured us, but he will bind us up. So,
Yeah.
um, interesting, because it kind of shows. I don't know. It's an interesting idea, which I think we come into conversations of: does God really bring pain and bad things to our lives, or is that just a result of our consequences of living in a broken world? That balance and I guess the nuance of that conversation is very important, because it's it shares different things about God depending how you look at it, right? Um, yeah,
Yeah. I think we're
yeah,
just prone to attribute things to God, whether positive or negative.
Mm.
Whether God, actively plays a role in those things happening or not, or whether that
Mm-hmm.
be His will or not, right? And
Right.
so, at least when I read this, right, I can imagine Hosea, right, after saying like, okay, this is what God says, right? Now this is what I'm telling you. Come,
Right.
let us return to the Lord. He has torn us to pieces, which it's cool because I mean, not being torn to pieces isn't cool, but um, when I read this verse, just like the last couple of chapters that we covered, it was talking
Mm-hmm.
about this, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
talking about how God was gonna tear Israel apart, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If they didn't turn from their ways, and they
Mm-hmm.
did, and it seems like, at least the way that I like to read it, and might be like eisegesis, right? You putting your own thing
Right.
into
Right.
God's
Right.
word that doesn't say.
Right.
So don't use this, but this is how I view it. I view it as like, um uh there's a certain kind of like protection I feel like
Mm.
God has had with his people. He
Mm-hmm.
favors them
Mm-hmm.
and wants the best for them, and even when they hurt him, he's just continues to be there.
Right.
And it just comes to a point where he's like, listen, it pampering you, you're not learning, right? You're not growing, you're just taking advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And so he
Mm-hmm.
allows for certain things to happen. That's, at least that's how I read this
Yeah.
verse.
Yeah. Yeah.
He has allowed us to be torn to pieces, I feel,
Yeah.
because that's what would naturally happen without God's protection. I mean, you're talking about a
Mm-hmm.
really small nation
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just surrounded by world, powers like Egypt and Assyria and later
Mm-hmm.
Babylon and things like that, that are just so much more powerful, really, economically and military and all that stuff, um, and just so far better than they are, even
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like technology, right?
Right.
Um, and God's like, yeah, so I'm the one that was kind of keeping you afloat. And now it's kind of like, when you're a pastor, you start something like a new thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like kind of all on you.
Right.
And
Right.
then you're like trying to
Interesting.
bring people and saying like, hey,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
trying to train them to do that which
Mm-hmm.
you're doing, and you never really get to fully train them yet. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I gotta go on vacation, or oh, I have another engagement that I need to go to, I can't make
Yeah.
it that night, and it all just falls through.
Right.
I feel like that's kind of like the
That's good.
sensation here is
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, God has planted you, God is sustaining you, and you're like, nah, I want nothing to do with you, and you shut the door on God,
Mercy.
and
Mercy.
then
Yeah.
it falls
Mm-hmm.
through.
Mm-hmm.
So I at least that's how I look at it, and also how confident is Hosea, dude? He's
Mm-hmm.
like, he has torn us to pieces, but he will heal us. He has injured us,
Yeah.
but he will bind up our wounds. And so, it's interesting because he kind of, I don't know, makes less of this comment, right? He has torn us to pieces because like right after he's like, but he will heal us, like,
Mhm.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
hurting, but
Yeah.
don't worry,
Yeah.
he's gonna
Yeah.
heal us. But then the second one, it seems like there's a a timepiece to it, and what I mean by that is like, he has injured us, but he will bind up our wounds. It's not like they will immediately heal. Apparently,
Right.
apparently, he's
Right.
just gonna, put that band-aid on, and the healing process has to take place. It has to happen. It'll probably itch
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. You might want to
Mm-hmm.
scratch at the scab or whatever,
Right. Right.
but
Right.
there's gonna have to be a process to it, and I like that because sometimes we feel hurt
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
God, whether it was him or not, and we're just like,
Mm-hmm.
man, like
Mm-hmm.
this really hurts, God. Why are you allowing this,
Mm-hmm.
me to go through this?
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
a way, Hosea is saying like, yeah, it's a healing process that you have to go through with
Because of
God,
yeah.
um, regardless whether it's his fault or not,
Mm-hmm.
and it's gonna take some time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. There's that idea, right? Like you're saying, right, of just our actions taking us away from where God is leading us. And so you know, if you take God out of the equation, you take, life, protection in this sense, right, of prosperity and all that. But it's beautiful, right? Because in the midst of all this, God could have really just been like, or even Hosea and speaking, he said, hey, all right, this is it. You lost your chance, never coming back, right? You're never going to learn back. And at every point, every moment, God is still saying, hey, if you come back to me torn in pieces, right, because of something that I allowed due to your actions and not wanting to be with me, hey, you go do what you want. But because of your, we kind of see the history of this, right? The people of Israel going between like Syria and Egypt, and trying that political affairs that they're doing that doesn't work out, and it gets
Yeah.
one nation mad. It happens later in the final exile with Babylon, where they run to Egypt for help, and Babylon's like, "What are you guys doing? You're our slave," So it's like they bring this about upon themselves, right? But there's this idea that God's kind of, I don't know if it's maybe kind of how parents feel when their kids get in trouble, right? When they knew, hey, I knew I had the power to stop it, but I allowed it so that they could learn their lesson. But it's kind of feels like I have some sort of responsibility, because I could have stopped it, right? I could have not allowed this to happen. And so maybe this is the idea, right, where God's saying, hey, he has torn us to pieces because he could have stopped it, but he didn't. He allowed us our actions and the decisions that we made, the breaking of the covenant, and the relationship to continue, and say, hey, look, you go and do that, but know that the moment you want to, I'm here to heal those, heal you and put you back together. And it's going to be a process, like you said, right? I'm going to bind up your wounds. It's going to take some time, but
Yeah.
yeah, the
I
beautiful
mean, what it
imagery.
comes down to, I think, is mercy, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
when you see God's mercy, right? Mercy is
Yeah.
when you're not given what you deserve, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so just because at one moment he's merciful, and at
Mm-hmm.
the next he decides not to be merciful, doesn't make him any less just for
Yeah.
doing so.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're still getting what you deserve. And so I think that in Israel's case, mercy came to a point where it kind of, he's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it, you
Yeah.
know. And
There's
I
like a
guess that's
boundary that
the
he
that's the
sets.
answer to
Yeah.
some people who are like, how come these people don't acknowledge God and they have all this and all that? And well, God's being very merciful,
Mhm.
is my take.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. And but it also shows kind of, and we I think talked about this in other chapters here in Hosea, like there's just a boundary setting, right? Where
Hmm.
God's like, there's only so much, right? Because at some point, then he becomes an enabler of that bad action
Right.
that Israel is doing, right? And hurting themselves and hurting others. And God's like, no, that's it. This is where the draw. I mean, I'm gracious, but to an extent, this is you've overdone it, right? And this is where I'm like, yeah, you're gonna get what your actions have brought upon you. And so
Yeah.
there's this idea of God as a hurt lover in Hosea, but also one that says, I know my boundaries, I know my worth, I guess you can say. And at
Hmm.
some point, even though I'm always here with open arms, it's like you got to learn your lesson that this is that without me and how you're living is going to lead to your ruin and despair.
Yeah.
But just the beautiful imagery there. Again, heal us. He's going to bind up our wounds. And in verse 2, after 2 days, he will revive us. On the third day, he will restore us that we may live in his presence, right? And
Sounds
such a beautiful.
familiar. Yeah.
Sounds familiar. Right? We talked about this a little bit, I think, last time, right? Where there was this, was it last week
Yeah, it
about
feels like the
the two
second
days?
time he repeats this whole like imagery of Jesus, dying and resurrecting on the third day.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to find where that verse is on. I don't remember, but yeah, there's that imagery there of that 2 days and third day and 3 days. Um, a scholar slip up, right? It's believed that here Hosea is kind of referring to Jonah and his experience. If you know the story of Jonah, the prophet, he doesn't want to go preach to Nineveh, and he goes opposite, and he gets the storm comes, they throw him overboard, a fish takes him in his in his belly, which true story, a guy was in the belly of a fish recently, or a whale. I don't know if you saw that story, the news channel news story.
I don't know, man. So many wild stories. Now
There
we got
is,
like
yeah,
gigantic goldfish here in Florida. I don't really know. I don't know
I
what's
didn't
going
see
on.
that gigantic goldfish.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Gigantic, I gotta check that out. But yeah, this guy was in the belly of a fish. um yeah, but yeah, pretty crazy. But yeah, so Jonah's there, and then he's in there 3 nights, I guess 2 nights and 3 days or so.
Hmm.
um and then it's kind of this illusion that on the third day he kind of had a new life, because he came out with a new purpose to go out and preach and be unafraid. And obviously Jesus then takes this imagery and he applies it to himself, say, just like Jonah was in the fish for 3 days, so I'll be on the ground, but then I'll come back to a new life. So this idea of just kind of
I love that.
resurrection, right?
But just to
Yeah.
interrupt real quick, because you're talking about Jonah, how he came out with new life and new purpose, and I love that
Yeah.
illustration because Jesus comes out with a new life, but a new purpose for us. You know what I'm saying?
That's good. That's good.
So
Yeah.
that's cool.
And even though Jonah goes on to say, I did I preached, I want him to
Yeah.
die. He still had his ethnic and national prejudice, and
Mm-hmm.
but Jesus doesn't do that.
His racism. Yeah.
His racism, right? But this idea right here, this language that is used later in the New Testament to apply to Jesus of just the resurrection, that not only is attributed to Jesus, but also is able to be handed to us, right? This power of resurrection that Jesus holds, power over death, to restore. So all things that we lose or that die can be restored and resurrected and revived. And
Yeah.
then that beautiful promise that we may live in his presence, right? And so I think for people that it's kind of like that imagery, going back to what you said about the pastor leaving on vacation for a bit
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
coming back and everything's array. Like the people that are there, they're probably thinking like, man, when is he coming back? Because we want to be in his presence again, to be able to run things again, to obviously then, navigate and delegate the stuff for later. But right now we need him. We need his presence. We need his presence with us again. But yeah. And then the promise of the end of verse 3, as surely as the sun rises, he will appear. He will come to us like the winter rains, like the spring rains that water the earth. And for me, again, going back to that illustration of the Notebook movie, you think and you look at God and you're like, God, just give her up, man. She's not, here he is, and I think I've preached a sermon or two on a message, for like chapels and stuff about the Notebook and just how, just like, what's his name? That's not Jack.
Noah.
That's Noah. Just like Noah builds a house for his, how Jesus is building a house for,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. But it's just that, you just hear it and he's just the wounded lover, right? That no matter how many times he's always willing to take her back. And in the same in the Notebook, we're all like, yo, just move on, bro. Like she's hurt you. She's left. She doesn't know what she wants. You've done so much. You've been humiliated by her family and everything. And yet you're still there. And the same thing we kind of apply to God, to say, God's just like, there's always that hope. Like, oh, surely as the sun rises, he will appear. Like he's going to be here again. And you can just trust in his love that he's just going to keep coming to this place that probably, brings so much hurt to him, but it's just who he is, just a gracious and merciful God. Sure, he makes boundaries, right? But the moment that you and I are like, hey, I'm ready to come back to God, he's like, boom, let's do it.
Yeah. I'm sure back then, like there was enough information, or at least intuition, that they would be like, oh, okay, the sun sets on this side, but it rises on that side. Maybe there's some kind of circular motion, but they couldn't really. I don't feel like they could explain like what made the sun rise.
Right.
And I think that that's really cool, because sometimes we try to find out exactly like, okay, why or how God's going to show up. And God's like, don't worry about how or why, just know that I am. As naturally as the sun rises, that's a fact. It's going to rise.
Every morning you wake up, the sun's there before you. So it's like,
that's a certainty which you have to expect me with. Whether you know why or how or when,
right.
Don't worry about it. But just that certainty, to have it in mind, to have it in your heart that he will, show up.
That's good. That's good. Having that certainty that, you may not know how it happens or how it rises, but it's always there. So we continue in verse 4 here. And now we're going to see what the word is for these people. What can I do with you, Ephraim? And what can I do with you, Judah? This is funny here. Your love is like the morning mist, right? Which I know we may not like it because the grass gets all wet and then my dog's paws get all dirty when they come back. But your love is like the morning mist and like the early dew that disappears. Therefore, I cut you in pieces with my prophets. I killed you with the words of my mouth. This sounds like the song "Killing Me Softly" with his words. Killing me softly, yeah. Then my judgments go forth like the sun. For I desire mercy and not sacrifice, and acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. As at Adam, they have broken the covenant. They were unfaithful to me there. Gilead is a city of evildoers, stained with footprints of blood. As marauders lie in ambush for a victim, so do bands of priests. For they murder on the road to Shechem, carrying out their wicked schemes. And I have seen a horrible thing in Israel. there Ephraim is given to prostitution, right? That idea we've been talking about, and Israel is defiled. So pretty packed. Just kind of another legal, attack, not attack, but just proceeding or just statement against Ephraim and Judah. And he's asking, what can I do? Like, what can I do with you? What should I do with you? Right. It's kind of this like invitation to question, what would you do with yourself? And just that, it's just funny, right? Your love is like the morning mist, like the early dew that disappears. We just saw how, God and this idea that as early as the sun rises every morning, God's gonna appear. Like he's constant, he's present, just like the winter rains and spring rains that water the earth. He's gonna show up, and then he turns his attention to the people and he says, "Yo, you guys have not been. I mean, your love and your devotion, your faithfulness to me is like the morning mist, and like the early dew that disappears. Like it's there for a moment, but then as soon as the sun comes out." Which I don't know if that's a play on, even earlier, right? As God kind of being the sun. As soon as the sun comes out, it dries up and it's no more. So that love and devotion that you have is only for a moment, and then it's no more.
Yeah, and it's not even enough. Right? We live in Florida, right? So
Right.
imagine if you didn't have a sprinkler system, right,
Mm-hmm,
for your
mm-hmm.
grass, right, or your plants. There's just thought that in back in the garden when God created everything, like the morning dew was perfectly enough to
Right.
like satisfy everything. But try that today, right? When you go outside, it's like, oh, morning dew, that's so nice. Your grass is gonna die. Like your plants are gonna die. Morning dew is not enough, and so it gives
Yeah.
the appearance of like, oh, this is saturated with water, right? It's wet, so it should be able to drink that and be fine,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but it's not enough.
It's not. Yeah.
It's not enough. And
Yeah.
so I think that that's one, yes, something that he says
Mm-hmm.
to kind of, you know, bajarle la caña, no sé cómo, just to kind of like uh, uh, re- rebuke, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rebuke
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Israel. But at the same time, it's something that shows us a promise, right?
Yep.
Where, dude, my worship, I feel like no matter how great it is, it might
Mm-hmm.
just be as good as morning dew,
Wow.
and
Wow.
the rest of that has to be Jesus, right?
Right.
The rest of
Right.
that has to be Jesus. And I like this verse that he gives an example right after, right? So he says in verse 6, for I desire mercy, not sacrifice, an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings.
Mm-hmm.
We cite that verse all the time. It's like, oh wow, so powerful, right? But verse 7, he's like, as at Adam they have broken the covenant, right? And so I feel like he gives an example of this mercy that he's talking about. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And he goes all the way back to like the first moment where he had to choose
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
between mercy and sacrifice. And he chooses mercy before he even offers the sacrifice.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I thought that was pretty cool how he just like brought Adam into the conversation and was
Oh, that's
like,
good.
listen,
That's good. I see
if
what you're
there's
doing. Yeah.
anybody who should have died, it was this guy.
That's this guy. The
But
first dude.
I gave mercy rather than sacrifice. And yeah, we can talk about the story. It's like, oh, how did they get their clothes? Maybe something
Mm-hmm.
had to
Mm-hmm.
die. Yeah, something did have to die,
But the
but it
first
wasn't
thing that he
Adam.
did was give that mercy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So eventually something did have to die, but at that moment, not Adam,
Yeah. 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 No, that's good. That's good. It's just that idea, right? That I wonder, and it's probably in this context, right? And a lot of people have used this. I mean, it's used in other parts of the Bible too. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. Jesus quotes this too when he's one of his fights with the Pharisees, and he's like, "Hey, go and study what Hosea meant when he said, I want mercy more than sacrifice." And I wonder how much people it was just this lip service, right? Where
Yeah.
and that's why he compares it to dew, because it wasn't something that was constant or permanent. It was just something that maybe a ritual type thing that they did, right? Whether they presented sacrifices and they're like, all right, I'm good for the day. That's it. And he's like, that's literally what your actions and your idea of what this relationship with me is, it's just an unhealthy one. You think you're constantly before me, but it's really like mist that dries up, and really, like you said, doesn't help anything.
Yeah,
Doesn't stay
everything still
long enough.
dies whether the
Yeah,
mist is there or not.
right, right, right. So just a powerful there. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. Just the idea. I value your presence, your heart, more than you performing and more than you doing, because that's not how it works, right? It's not about what you do and can accomplish and perform, but it's about just being here in this relationship and fellowship. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, for sure. And to grow, I think the reason why they are compared to mist is because they, like you said, lip service. They
Mhm.
just went through the motions. They had zero care or interest in why they were doing what they were doing. They just, or maybe the wrong why. Maybe they were just doing it. Okay, let's just appease this God so that nothing bad happens to us, and then we can continue like pleasing these other gods which we made, which are, I guess, I don't know, for them was like, I don't know if it was like more fun or more like appealing to worship those gods than it was to worship
Right.
the God of Abraham. But um, either way, you kind of see how he compares them to that, simply because, like you said, they're going through the motions.
Hmm.
And um, if they really value went to its core and saw like, all right, Jesus or this Messiah figure, I think that they would actually be more than
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
actually be enough to give nutrients and satisfaction to the earth, right, to the
Yeah.
land.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I think about like in relationships, right? Where you may have someone that thinks that they have to do because that's like, oh, that's your love language. I'm just gonna do and I'm gonna serve and I'm just gonna sacrifice and just show that I'm just really in this.
Hmm.
And a lot of times you have that conversation where like, hey, or even, you have, the person, one of the persons might have some money to, they're just buying all these types of gifts, and hey, here's this, I love you, and then it's like, well, you're not really spending time with me. I don't really feel like you're present. You're just trying to either give gifts to show that you love me, or you're doing all these things, but when it comes down to it, we're not really spending time uh connecting and being together, right? And we fool ourselves, I think, in thinking that, hey, look, man, I'm giving my girl all these like stuff, I'm buying her roses every day, she's getting chocolates, and I got her this watch, and I'm getting there this and that, and at the end of the day it can be like, hey, that's cool and all, and I appreciate it, but more than what you can give me, I want you, right? I want your presence, I want you to be here. And I think that happens sometimes even in families, that where you have someone that works so hard, the parents and the kids sometimes have that they miss that like connection, because the parents are like, well, I'm trying to give all this and do this all for you, which is a noble thing to do. But the kids most of the time are like, well, I just never had you really present in my life. You provided for what I needed, but in terms of material stuff, but we never really connected. And I wish we could have connected more, even if that meant having less of the material stuff. So I think
Yeah.
there's that relationship principle there of just, I guess, having an honest conversation, which is what God is having here. He's really opening up his heart and what he needs. And it's, I think also for us as humans, when we look at that relationship between God and humans, it allows us to kind of take a breath and be like, wow, I don't have to perform. I don't have to always be on my A game, because I'm not always on my A game. I'm not always, it's okay to just be how I am. And it kind of puts the pressure off of us to have to perform and to do. And then that begins to like be competition. Man, I'm doing more things than Brian. Brian's not sacrificing enough, right? And then it's just creates
Yeah.
a dichotomy of just like a way of living that is unhappy, because we're never truly satisfied. And God says, man, that's not what I want, man. You just got to be merciful, like be how I am, right? Loving, forgiving, merciful, and literally just an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings, right? Of truly knowing who God is and taking that
Yeah.
moment. So
Yeah. No,
yeah.
for sure. And I think that naturally, scripture points out how um the blessings, right, and like the expansion of the boundaries and all these things happen when the people turn towards God, right, and actually give of their time, or express their love for God.
Mhm.
um and I think that one, we should be aware of that, right? That
Hmm.
we're not showing God this love so that He can pour the blessings on us, but as
Yeah.
we engage in like a genuine relationship with God, well, things naturally happen, you know, and
Hmm.
they naturally
Hmm.
happen for Israel, they naturally happen for David and
Right.
later Absalom, um, and God, and you know, obviously the latter half of Absalom's reign was like all because of the mercies of God, but
Hmm.
um, you know, I think that God is more concerned with the relational aspect,
Hmm.
and then flourishing will naturally happen because
Hmm.
God is present in what you do and what you speak
Yeah.
and in who
Yeah.
you are.
Hmm. Yeah. That relationship is the most important part, and the rest will kind of flow from that and follow from that. But yeah, that's beautiful.
And that's not to say like, oh, you're going through a hard time, oh, you don't have a relationship with God,
Right.
you know,
Mm-mm.
because you're not um you're not exempt from the sufferings of this world, right?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and we
So
kind of touched on that in what I think Psalms, right, where it's like it's not always nice and beautiful. You have hard times, um, but yeah. So just that I think that's kind of for me that the verse that jumps out from this chapter here, verse 6, and just really at the heart, you see it being carried over throughout the Bible and the New Testament too, of just what is it that truly God wants, right? When we look at religion, religiosity, and when we're trying to do this faith thing, what is it that God wants? Is it my sacrifice, as Martin Luther would talk about, of just whipping himself and just penance and just trying to do all the, like, crawling on his knees and
I'm good, bro.
praying all these things? And it's like God's like, no, it's not about that, man. It's not about how much you can sacrifice and how you can torment your, whatever it is that you're doing. It's more about just, hey, accepting my mercy and being
I can only
merciful to
imagine
others.
God being like, "Yo, why are you doing
Yeah.
that to your body? Like that's why I allowed people to do that to mine, so you wouldn't have to
Right,
do
right,
it to
right.
yours.
Ooh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, 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 yeah. I said, what are you doing?
What are
Yeah.
you doing, bro?"
Yeah, religion isn't about that, man. It's not. Yeah, but pretty powerful stuff here, and going towards and the people of Israel, and again finishing in that verse 10 there. I have seen a horrible thing in Israel. There, if Ephraim is given to prostitution and Israel is defiled, right? So just read these harsh accusations, going back to the beginning of the book, right? Of just Hosea being called to marry a prostitute. So Ephraim is being considered a prostitute and being told, hey, you're defiled and you're a prostitute. That's crazy. I wonder how many church people, if this letter was written to us today, right, to our churches or people, would that kind of language be used for us today, where and I think it's kind of like what in Revelation, the church in the last church, Laodicea, kind of has that, hot and cold idea where you're in, but you're also out. You have one foot in, one foot out. This idea of like a divided heart um, is present, in people and churches today. And so it's just this awakening, I think, and through this graphic language and imagery to say, hey, this is what you're doing doesn't work. You're being really, really bad. Really
Yeah,
bad.
and he's just repeating, right? Chapter 5, verse 3, right? You have turned to prostitution. He says about
Mm-hmm.
Ephraim again,
Mm-hmm.
and so um,
Mm-hmm.
it's like he starts with that, and then he goes on, and, and the guy's like, "Yeah, don't forget, like I still remember you turned to prostitution." Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, tough chapter, man.
Yeah, man. But I mean, there's hope, right? Because I wonder, I don't know how much of this is Jesus, right? Or just really not connected. It's not really connected. But I mean, the beautiful thing is that Jesus was accused of eating with tax collectors and prostitutes in the New Testament, right? So even though it's not a one for one, I think comparison, right? Because it's a total, here it's kind of, in more of a negative light. But it's the idea that God is willing, as we saw earlier, to
Yeah,
heal, to bind up, to show up, and he's gonna show up day in and day out as the sun rises, um, even though we keep failing and failing. And
the fact that he's speaking to them through a prophet shows that he's willing to sit at the table,
yeah,
you know,
that's a great,
and
yeah,
have a conversation.
yeah. That's a
So
great. I know a lot of people will be like, man, these Old Testament books, they're just so harsh, right? There's so much judgment and doom and gloom coming, and the reality is that they were given as messages before it all happened, right? So the fact that he's sending out these messages of like warning beforehand is a merciful act, because any one of us, if we, you don't, if you want to go beat up your neighbor or something for some reason, you don't send them a hey. I mean, maybe some of us, hey, slow down. If not, you're gonna get. Yeah, I guess we do that. Slow down. You're gonna get a whooping. But a lot of times, if you really are upset and to the line, to the point where many of us would be if we were in God's shoes, we would just show up and just that's it. You learn your lesson. But God just, hey, sends a text, sends an email saying, hey, look, your music is too loud, neighbors. Please slow it down before I call the cops.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's truly a merciful act, Sarah, because when you look at people who have actually gone through moments of despair, like true despair,
mhm.
where like killings are happening and like
Yeah.
they're ostracized and spread abroad and like taken to concentration camps and things like that. Um, like the testimonies of these people who have gone through those difficult moments,
Hmm.
um, it shows like two things really, right? What keeps them alive, or
Hmm.
what keeps them like hopeful and sane. One is either their religious views, right, or
Hmm.
their
Hmm.
their belief in their deity, and two, their attachment to the relationships that they formed before the event occurred. So like
Yeah.
either family
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
close relatives or people that they truly loved. Um, and what it shows here, I feel like what God's kind of telling Israel is like, listen, this is coming because there's no way out of it now. And he's not asking them to return so that he stops,
Hmm.
Babylon or
Hmm.
Syria or whoever the heck is supposed to come after his book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's basically telling them like, get ready. Like in a
Hmm.
sense, like take this time to really pour into your family, into your relationships,
Hmm.
because I want you to survive. I want you to make it through. And I think that oftentimes we don't look at that aspect of God of
Yeah.
saying like,
Yeah.
hey, I got cancer or something, and there was nothing that God wasn't like, oh, Brian, you're gonna have
Hmm.
cancer. This
Hmm.
is a true story, by the way. I don't have cancer, but
Yeah.
um, and through it, God kind of like prepares you to go through that moment, through the
Hmm.
chemotherapy and all these things. And I have family members who have gone through all that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what keeps you hopeful, what keeps you saying like, oh, like, you know you, you feel, according to these people, you feel like you're gonna die, or like, yo, just I'm done because of all the pain that you're going through, that
Hmm.
everything hurts.
Hmm.
um but just being able to be close to your family and having this like connection to God really allows these people to go through it and end well on the other side. And I think that that's kind of what God is calling for in a way, is like,
Hmm.
even if you were to say, no, I'm not going to turn back, at least invest in their relationships, at least invest in your
Mm,
community.
mm.
Don't worry about like buying the best house because that's going to get destroyed by
Yeah, yeah.
these people that are coming to come down on you. Just focus on your relationships. And I think
Mhm.
that that's really cool. That's good of God to say, that's going to get you through, and I want you to make it through because I want to bless you again.
Yeah,
I want
yeah,
to redeem you.
yeah. And it's such a paradigm shift, right? Because in our world, we kind of think of like true power being about like holding back. I think, when you think about like money, paying people for what they do, hey, I'm gonna be the one that has all the blessings or money or the gifts, and then I'll be the one to give however I deem fit, right? And it's like, all right, you get a little bit, you get here, but God is kind of like operating a different mindset where it's like, I don't want to withhold and then just be the one with all the power and money and blessings and just be okay. I mean, here you go, boom. I'm gonna give you a little. He's like, if I could, Malachi says I would open up the windows and literally just, the doors and open and just flush it all down and let you be blessed by it, right? So I can imagine it's hard. I mean, if we were in his position, right, with being kind of how we are mean and evil, we would be like, I'm just not going to give it to you guys today. You didn't earn it. You messed up. And God's like, it's killing me inside because I want to be so good to you, but I also need to allow you to learn a lesson that living in this way leads to death and pain. But I'm just inside, I'm dying to help you, which is not really the natural response that I have, right? Most of the time, I'm
Yeah.
like, if someone gives me a reason to not want to help them, or some reason to not be good to them, I'm like, all right, that's all I need.
You earned it.
You earned it. I'm not gonna, that's, you missed out. And here God's like, it's the opposite, where he's hurting when we don't give him the chance. And he's like, I just want to love and serve and be good to you.
Yeah.
So just a powerful description of God, that in the midst of this, of all these little minor prophets and Old Testament books, you find the true kind of, if you peel back the layers, you find the heart of God that is just hurting to love and be loved, right at the core of everything, and to really help us to understand what it truly is all about, right? As you were talking about, right? Reconnecting with God, or reconnecting with community, and really focusing on, hey, that's more important than anything else, than advancing yourself, or making these political arrangements to better benefit you more than others. So I think it's a powerful reminder for us today, in just that verse, to seek mercy more than sacrifice, and the acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. I'm just curious to see what the Message Bible says about those. Let's see, Hosea 6:6. Oh, okay. I think you'll like this. Maybe. Let me put on the. Here, I'm gonna put it right here and see what. It says, verse 6 and 7. I want you to know God, not to go to more prayer meetings. Ooh.
What?
You broke the covenant, just like Adam. You broke faith with me, ungrateful wretches. So, oh, I see what you're saying.
What do you
I
mean?
messed up. Sorry, hold up. I missed a verse. Let me see. It says, I'm after love that lasts, not more religion. I want you to know God, not to go to more prayer meetings. I mean, there's something to it. I do like that. I'm after a love that lasts and not just isn't moment, right? Because that kind of goes with the idea of the do, right? Before that, it's a love that actually lasts, and not just more religion of just doing and just a formalism.
Yeah.
And I want you to know God, not to go to more prayer meetings. So
That's I'll try to preach that next time.
right there, man. I'm after a
See
love
what
that lasts.
happens.
Love
See what
that lasts. I'm reading today from the Message Bible. Not more religion. I want you to know God, not to go to more prayer meetings. Yeah. So powerful reminders here. In the midst of this accusation to the people of God, he looks at them and says, hey, at the core of it, I want a love that lasts, not more religion. I want you to know God, not to go to more prayer meetings. So powerful
Yeah.
stuff, man. Powerful
Yeah.
stuff. Again, just a question for us, right? If this was written to us, if Hosea was writing to us, what would it say?
Well, I feel like Micah kind of says something similar
Mm-hmm.
in Micah 6:8, right? That we most of us know.
Oh, the love
What do I
mercy.
desire or require of you, right? To act
Mm-hmm.
justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God.
Yeah.
Is in essence not word for word the same, but in essence, they're calling prophets are calling for people to focus their relationship, with God, and to
Mm-hmm.
let that change how they perceive the world, and what to do about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. I mean, look at the Message Bible. Do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love, and don't take yourself too seriously. Take God seriously. So, I mean, it's a nice sentiment there. Do
It's
what
a,
is
it's a
fair.
little it's a little washed, but yeah.
But it's good. But it's good. But it's good. Well, awesome. That's a great conversation here. So going into our lightning round, as we close up here today, a lot has been going on in the news, obviously all over the place. Sometimes hard to keep up. But one of the biggest thing now is with all of everything that's going on in Cuba, that it just seems like I feel like it's been going on for a while, but it just now hit, I guess, mainstream media and stuff. I'm not really sure I guess what triggered it was people protesting, which is kind of unusual to do because it's under, they're under dictatorship, and all that can just, you think about China too. North Korea. It leads to people being, I guess, tracked and imprisoned, right, for many things. And we know a lot of people that have stories and told us of this, the suppression of truth or religion, faith, or whatever it is, there. So yeah, it's a hard time with our Cuban brothers and sisters. I think since I was born, it's always been to talk about Cuba. When I went into pastoral ministry, talking about what pastors get paid there, and just talking about the resources and hearing stories of people that were able to get out and leave, and then also people that are able to go and visit and see the disparity between how tourists are treated, which I think happens a lot in tourist locations, right? Tourists can be treated all elegante and a lot of, but the people themselves don't have access to the same thing because they want to keep obviously tourism coming and whatnot. So I don't know if you have any Miami insights since you're closer to Cuba than we are up here, but
Just see a lot of Cuban American flags,
mm,
and it's difficult to show something more than solidarity because it's such a closed country that it's difficult to kind of
like
do
what,
more.
yeah, right, right.
And that's hard to understand, as someone who, a lot of our people
Hmm.
are Cuban or have, Cuban parents or grandparents, um and yeah, they they feel it a lot more strongly than we could. But there's that sense of like, I guess the closest thing that I could compare it to is like, there was a hurricane that passed through Puerto Rico, Maria, not too long ago, and my wife, she's Puerto Rican, and her parents live in Puerto Rico, and
Hmm.
that sense of disparity that she went through, uh, not only because she couldn't help, but she wasn't there with her parents during the storm. I can imagine it's
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
the same sentiment that a lot of Cuban Americans feel
Our feeling, yeah.
towards their countrymen and towards their families that they have
Hmm.
left
Hmm.
over there. And so, yeah, I could
Hmm.
definitely see how it's a moment where we need to pray and be allies as best we can to those who are
Hmm.
going through those
Yeah.
difficult times.
Yeah, I do think you summarized it really well. It's like we don't know some, what more than solidarity and posting on Instagram and Facebook and you can do, right? I think that was kind of the sentiment with, I mean, it's a little different because it's, like when we had the Black Lives Matter protests last summer and throughout the year, I guess it's in our country, so there's more you can do. But this, right, as you're saying, it's kind of hard because it's a different country. How do you get involved? What can we do? Yeah, it's tough. But I think, yeah, raising that awareness is pivotal. And yeah, but it's a tough situation. And I can, my heart's with those, like you're saying, right? I think perfect illustration of people feeling helpless, right? All their families, friends. I know we have pastor friends too that are Cuban, and families are there, and it's like, you just feel helpless because you wish you could be there to fight alongside with them, protest, or just be able to provide as much as possible. But it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
So our hearts are with our brothers and sisters there. So, but moving on to our second topic, as we saw last week, we had the ending last weekend of a lot of our championships. So if you didn't keep up, Italy beat England in penalties, which their luck came back to bite them again. Um, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. My thought is I think the coach messed up in bringing guys that really hadn't. I know they're professionals, right? And I get that, but
Yeah.
in any sport, I mean, I think about basketball. If you ask someone that hasn't played the whole game to come in and knock down some free throws at the end, which is a little different, right? Because you're shooting against someone that's 10. But it's kind of hard if you haven't really been, you can warm up all you want, but if you haven't shot the ball and seen it go through, like it's just, it's tough. So I think that the coach in putting the last, at least Rashford and Sancho to come in the last minute or two of the extra time, and then having them shoot free the penalties was kind of like, man, a lot of pressure already, and really not having taken a shot on goal or pass the ball at all or anything like that. It's a tough position, I think, to be in. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the huge difference between Mbappe missing a penalty in like quarterfinals
Mm-hmm.
versus a young 19-year-old missing a penalty in the final,
That's true.
right?
That's
A
true.
young black 19-year-old where you're representing a country that's racism is still very much alive in. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's really, really difficult. But I don't, I can't really have like a strong opinion because I feel that, there are things that happen in training sessions that we're not privy to.
That's true.
Maybe, maybe the 19-year-old made 10 out of his 10 penalties, and Sterling only made 1 out of
One. Right.
10. And so you're
Right.
like, well, naturally the better penalty taker is the 19-year-old
Right.
kid, and
Right.
so I'm going to put him. But to leave him to the end, like where you
Yeah.
have all that time to think about, like, oh my gosh, where am I going to kick the ball? It's too much, man.
That's
You
too
either
much.
put
Yeah.
him second
I would
or
put
something.
or go first, man. Put him first. Get it out of the way. Yeah.
But yeah, I think leaving him for last was kind of difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I would have personally, like training session or no training session, I would have put names, right? So I would put Grealish, I would put Sterling, I would put
Mm-hmm.
the bigger names, the stars, those who
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, things came out where they're like, oh, why didn't so and so take the penalty? And they came out and they said, hey, listen, I offered to take it, I just
But the
wasn't.
coach, yeah.
And the coach was the one who chose who took the penalties.
Right. Right. Right.
I don't think he chose correctly,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously the coach is privy to more training sessions and more information than we
Right.
are.
Right.
So
Right.
it's kind of hard to say, oh, you suck.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah. And it's kind of hard to, I think, like,
It, it just sucks that the 3 African American players
yeah,
were the
it
ones who missed
sucks.
the
Yeah,
penalties. Like
it sucks.
that sucks.
And it's kind of hard. I mean, it's kind of the talk, right? And this is more soccer lingo, I guess, but kind of what happens with like Pep Guardiola, where sometimes he'll try to do too much of like that cerebral game, right? Like a reason they mentioned they may have lost to Chelsea in the Champions League final is because he just changed his formation that they had never played. But he's like, maybe this will win because it'll give us some advantage, right? And sometimes, hey, just stick with what you know. And, so maybe that would have been, in my mind, sticking with what you know is like, hey, the guys that were playing the game that, have that confidence. Rashford hasn't really had a great season. I haven't really followed that much, but from what I hear, he wasn't really, playing so well. I think Sancho was, but it's just the pressure, putting guys that have been there before, right? So I think, Grealish obviously is kind of a new name in the block, but he really walks around like he has the confidence, right, to really just do that. Sterling has taken thousands of penalties, and so, you put one of the whatever, it's just that's the thing about penalties in soccer, man. It just leaves it up to chance. The goalie can guess right. You can have the best keeper, the best shooter, and you miss it. So, but yeah, next one. So Italy won that one in penalties, and then Argentina.
Yeah, bro.
Argentina won Copa America 1-0, beating Brazil. They just this says it all. Just the faces of happiness, and I don't know if you saw. There's so many. The TYC came out with a lot of just messy smile. So just exciting, man. How does it feel, man? ¿Cómo se siente ser campeón?
Bro,
Vamos a ser
honestly, I
campeón del
still
mundo,
like.
but
I'm just going about my business, and all of a sudden, like,
you just remember.
oh my god, bro, we are the champs, man.
Yeah.
Like I'm saying, I didn't play a single minute. I was watching on TV. Like I'm nowhere near as good as these guys, obviously.
Yeah.
But
That's hilarious.
and I love the sportsmanship after the final whistle. I think that was one of my favorite parts.
Yeah.
Both Neymar going up to Messi and like congratulating him, and Paredes consoling Neymar towards the end.
Yeah.
That locker room talk or that tunnel talk that the three of them have, Messi, Neymar, and Paredes. The fact that when Argentina was celebrating towards the stands, that one of the players was about to sing a very you know, ill
Yeah.
chant
So.
towards Brazil about like, you know, putting them down because of the defeat, that, you know, both Messi and Aguero were able to, you know, tell a player, hey, no, that's not all right, and they didn't chant it, was something powerful as well. I think that many times you get caught up in the emotions and you do things that you aren't supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
or that
Mm-hmm.
really just like diminish your opponent for no reason. And that wasn't done. And so
Mm-hmm.
I really valued that. You know, it made me feel proud, um,
Mm-hmm.
even the same or just as much as being, you know, champions. It made me feel proud of
Mm-hmm.
the um, the behavior of the players.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was good, man. It really felt like there was a lot of like mutual respect, right? In the midst of it, it's a great rivalry. Obviously, it's a new generation. Obviously, they've grown with the kind of the animosity between Brazil and Argentina. But you just see, I think in the players, right, there was just a lot of respect, even in some of the fans, the Brazilian fans. A lot of people were even wanting, they're like, "Yeah, Messi deserved it, man. It's been a while. It's his first senior international trophy with Argentina, something that had eluded him for so long through various mishaps, whether in penalties with Chile or thousands of missed goals with Germany in the World Cup. Finally got that. So I think that, uh,
Yeah,
yeah, man,
yeah,
it was
and
exciting to see. I'm just happy for him.
yeah, the feeling is there. It's not gonna fade. I mean, we're
Hmm.
champs till, you know, that's how we're
So,
going into the World Cup,
right.
as, you know, champions of South America, and that's all always like a good thing to have, because, you know,
Hmm.
you feel secure in the way that you play. I think that we created a base, right, of where to grow from. Our
Hmm.
defense is
Hmm.
pretty solid. Um, and, you know, hopefully we make the gameplay a little bit more, you know, beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, man, I couldn't be happier. Messi
Yeah.
didn't have
Yeah.
his best game, but
But yeah.
he has had so many games where he put the whole team on his shoulders that,
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
once, for the assist and the goal not to come from him is
It's okay.
nothing
Yeah.
that we wouldn't ask any other player.
Hmm.
Ronaldo won the Euro without even being on the
He
field.
wasn't
So
even
I
on the
mean,
field. Right. 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 Right.
and we still like, oh, Ronaldo. So I mean,
Yeah.
man, this guy gave it all, like slide tackling, all everything, dude.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I think, and that just shows that something that Messi's been needing, right? A team that can, guys he can trust. And at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, I feel like he doesn't. I mean, he's not the type of guy that cares about his numbers and what he's doing and who's scoring. As long as, you can just tell how happy he was. As long as he brings honor and glory to Argentina, that's all he wanted
the
for
fact that
forever.
when the whistle blew, everybody came
Yeah,
to hug him
yeah.
and cry with him just says
Hmm.
a lot about
It does. It does. It does.
what the team was thinking, and what they were playing for, and acknowledging the fact that, you know, he's been there to show face every step
Hmm.
of the way. You know,
Yeah. No, I agree 100%, man. So, yeah, I'm super excited, and we'll be living this excitement and emotion for days to come. But
for the next couple of years.
for the next couple, I mean, not days, yeah, sorry, yeah, next couple of years.
Like, at least for me, I don't know. I'm be like,
I
yo,
mean, yeah, I mean,
we're
you can live till the World Cup and all that, man. And then we're gonna go into the nation. Which one's the ones that the champions play? That Italy would.
So I think that FIFA canceled that. I think what they're
Oh
doing
man.
now is just a bigger like club World
Okay.
Cup thing, and they're adding like an Arabic Cup, Confederations Cup, or something like that. Um, so it's kind of like Copa America, but for the Arabic states. I don't really know
Oh,
how that
okay.
works.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, they're not. I don't think they're doing the Confederations Cup anymore.
Confederate. That's what it was called. Okay, I was wondering about what it was called. Confederations Cup. Who? Oh, that's interesting. Oh yeah, okay. So it's just, they kind of changed who's playing in it. But to do that. All right, and the last one, Loki reaction. Did you watch the last episode already?
Yeah, yeah, I watched
Yeah,
it.
me too. We
Um,
watched it the day of. So
I thought you guys were waiting till Saturday night to
we
do your.
were, and then we watched actually the week before. We watched it on Monday, and then on Wednesday we're like, We should at least watch one on the day.
You you're gonna and you're gonna get spoilers if you don't
right,
watch it the
exactly.
day
Yeah,
of.
yeah, there's just you can't really be online, and thankfully people, the Fallout at least were kind of cautious or more cryptic with what they said. But yeah, it's just kind of hard to. Every so often I would pop on something and like, oh, theory. Why is this? I was like, oh.
Yeah, I think the only part that was like, oh man, this sucks, was very like towards the end where his friend didn't recognize him.
Yeah,
Like that's the only part that to me sucked. The rest, I was like, oh
man.
okay.
Yeah.
I know Nani was like super surprised, like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
know nothing. But to me, I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
It is what it is, and there's a season 2, so
Right.
crazy.
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna watch a couple YouTube clips on people trying to explain, what happened. But
I agree. It was a lot, man. I was just like, I wasn't sure who this guy is, who the villain is. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Obviously, they leave things unanswered, but it just seems to be a thing for movies now. That's all right. Next season, you'll get I guess that's always been their MO. So, but I think overall it was great. It was great, very great, very well done. Great acting. Great conversations on especially in this last one about the importance of free will and determining everything or not allowing people to have free will, right? Which is kind of what we are shown into, that it's just someone saying this is what's going to happen regardless whether you like it or not. And it's like, we got to
I wonder how like Calvinists feel about the show.
Yeah. Like it's like, oh, you guys are exposing what we believe. Yeah. Because it gives it's a, you can tell, at least from your point of view, the you don't want what's happening, right? Which is that things are determined, and then we're finding out that there's someone behind it that's determining it. And so there's this fight for like, man, freedom of choice and free will for people to be able to choose what they want to do, whether that leads to chaos or not, just not having it all scripted and people living a lie.
Yeah.
But awesome, man. Well, congrats, campeón otra vez. Congrats. So we got the Argentina jersey back there. You guys can see it. Love it.
Oh, the other way.
I love it. Yeah. You kind of see the whole picture, the whole thing now. I don't have any Argentina stuff next to me right now, but I was wearing my shirt for 2 days straight.
Okay.
But, yeah. I mean, I took it off. Obviously, I didn't wear it the whole day all the time. But
and you reapplied, deodorant.
Yeah, reapplied deodorant, and it didn't really get dirty or anything like that, so it was good. But
yeah, you're fine.
Awesome, guys. Well, have a great weekend, and we'll see y'all next time. See you later.